The four idols are money, power, pleasure, and fame. And I really like this framework because it's actually pretty simple. And it's so the four idols, the idol would be, if you could only choose one of those, what are you pursuing?
Welcome to That Pivotal Moment of Change, the podcast that's not about what you do, but how you got to where you are. Let's dive into the twists, the turns, and defining moments that shape our careers. In this episode of That Pivotal Moment of Change, we chat with Connor Joyce, researcher, influencer, and author of Bridging Intention to Impact. Connor shares his nonlinear career journey, insights on navigating setbacks, and practical advice for finding your career's North Star. This episode will leave you inspired to take charge of your path and create meaningful impact.
Hey, Connor, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Ryan, glad to be here.
Glad to have you here. I am looking forward to this conversation with you today. So I am going to start off here. And do you want to talk about your background and how you got into product work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my career, I went to Illinois State University. I studied human resources and psychology, and I wound up being a consultant at Deloitte, human capital management focus. And there I had a chance to spend a lot of my time implementing Workday. And this was my first introduction to cloud, first to product management, and then overall, the real effort that goes behind not just building software, but getting people to use software. And so while that was a great introduction, I knew I wanted to go more into that space, but I also knew that I really wanted to focus on that specific piece of interaction with technology. And so I went and pursued a master's in behavioral science. And there I really learned about this field of applied behavioral science that focuses on developing interventions to encourage behavioral change, all in pursuit of better outcomes for that individual. And the thing was I thought that the natural way to scale those interventions was technology. And that is true, but the reality is that is not always how products are built. And I learned that post-graduation through my time working at Microsoft and then a collection of startups and through consulting that I've done since then. And that is where I now find myself is at this intersection of, again, that product space, product development, research that goes into product, and developing tools that help people achieve whatever outcomes they want through behavioral change. And that's where I find myself is at that intersection.
Amazing. And we're going to drill in to some of that as we go. I have a lot of questions for you, but I think we're going to flow in to everything from there. Before we really get rolling on you and how you got to where you are, I want to say congrats on your book. Super excited to see that go live recently. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you did and why you decided to write a book?
Yeah. So, the why is in that message that I just shared. The why is the fact that I see products as these unbelievable opportunities to help people accomplish whatever goals that they're trying to achieve. If I want to lose weight, there are hundreds of products out there that can help me attempt to do that. If I want to create a new savings account, again, many products that are available in the space to do that, but they don't all work. And a lot of them don't work. And the reality is it is because companies too commonly fall victim to the belief that if a product is being used, then they assume that it is accomplishing whatever task that person is trying to complete. And I saw that firsthand in the collection of companies that I worked at. And I worked to try to develop new ways of building product to focus first on the user outcomes, then on the connected behaviors that are necessary to change to alter that user outcome. But it is a business at the end of the day. And so it also the company needs to make sure that when they are satisfying those user outcomes, that it is ultimately creating a business impact, positive business impact. And so that was the thesis that I ran with a lot of my early work after completing the master's that I did. And as I worked more and it was able to build these frameworks, I realized this isn't something that I should just share with a couple of companies. This is something I want to get in the hands of as many people as possible. And so the why behind the book is there are a lot of amazing frameworks that exist to help define what users want to do. There are much fewer resources that really tell you how to build features in a way to satisfy those outcomes, especially those that are measurable. And that's what I believe I'm adding to the space with my book, Bridging Intention to Impact, is that specific behavior component, identifying what needs to be changed in that user's life through engaging with that feature that leads to that outcome. And ultimately that customer staying retained to the platform, having that loyalty where they're sharing the fact that that product is working. So that's the addition of the book. That's why I did it. And I am on the mission now that the book is out to continue to share that message and find companies who are eager to adopt some of the principles within it.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly relevant and timely. And I know you mentioned it, but it's Bridging Intention to Impact, transforming digital product development through evidence-based decision-making. And where can people find your book?
Yeah, so there's two primary places, straight through the publisher, which it's a Pearson company, new writers, Peach Pit. The website would be the Peach Pit website. If you type in the title, that is generally where you can find it at its best price. It's also available on Kindle, Amazon, that whole suite. If your company pays for O'Reilly, you also can get it, for most people, they can get it free to access on the O'Reilly platform.
We're going to move in here to some reflective questions. Want to start with, what are some key lessons you learned throughout your career that you would want to share with others?
I think at its core is that it's always great to have a place that you're going, something that you're striving, some North Star for your career. But the reality is that it's never a straight path to that North Star. And my career has been filled with a lot of great successes, and I'm extraordinarily grateful for where I'm at today talking to you. But I would have never been able to tell you that this is where I would be even 5 years ago when I graduated my master's, let alone 10 years ago when I graduated undergrad. I have not only changed that North Star as I've learned more, but I have continuously also adapted with, sometimes they're setbacks and sometimes they truly are growth opportunities where it was not only maybe a sidestep to whatever that path that I thought that I was on. And so again, I think that in that is, I'm a huge fan of Carol Dweck's work and its growth mindset, fixed mindset, and having a growth mindset, looking at everything as an opportunity to learn something new and grow towards some end state that you're working toward, again, that North Star, staying flexible, and then also continuously asking yourself, am I still on this path that towards this North Star that feels right? And when it doesn't feel right, then reassessing, is that North Star actually what I want? What is actually driving me to that North Star? And I'll give the quick example of this is, when I first joined consulting, the North Star was become a partner at a consulting firm. And that was something that I was excited about. I had found a great area implementing Workday, and I had all my certifications, and I had my build out of, I was beginning to get some great client connections. Things felt like they were moving in that right direction toward that North Star. But I wasn't actually that excited about it. I felt like there was something significantly missing. And so I started questioning that more and more until I began to realize I really wasn't. Like, there was not that much that was driving me towards wanting to be a partner other than the money and the prestige that came from it. And those weren't things that really were driving that intrinsic motivation or the reason why you get up out of bed. For me, the creation and the sharing of original thought, that's what really gets me excited. And so once I finally was able to identify that, it became easier to say, it's time for me to pivot. It's time for me to shift that North Star. And that North Star at that point shifted to, I want to lead a behavioral science team somewhere. And when I started to tell people, I'm planning to leave this consulting firm, I'm planning to go pursue a brand new master's in behavioral science, they're like, wow, you're giving up what is actually a very aspiring career for what? And it was an easy explanation to pretty much say, I know I won't be happy if I continue towards that end goal. So I found that I have this other calling to a different North Star. And I don't know exactly what that path looks like at this point, but I know that this step is in a great way. This step will put me on that path towards my new North Star that I feel much more comfortable on. So that, I would say that would be my greatest overall suggestion or greatest learning from my career is that North Star can continue to guide one and can be used as a reflection point to ask, am I still having fun? Am I still pursuing something that is greater than just the pursuit of money or status or power or whatever it might be that is driving somebody? That North Star is just a great reflection point.
A lot of things that you said there that I really like. We're going to drill into some of that as we go. Really appreciate what you're saying with the North Star. One follow-up question for you. I think for a lot of people, it is hard to figure out what that North Star is. There are a lot of twists and turns in a career. Do you have any quick advice for somebody who might be stuck trying to figure out what my North Star or what their North Star might be?
Yeah, so the first piece, and I've referenced this, but I'll give it a little bit more in detail. There's a framework called the Four Idols. I wish I could attribute exactly who it is that initially created it. I heard David Brooks talk about it when he was sharing about his new book, but I don't think he originally created it. But the four idols are money, power, pleasure, and fame. And I really like this framework because it's actually pretty simple. And it's so the four idols. The idol would be, if you could only choose one of those, what are you pursuing? Is it overall money? That is the driving factor. It's just you want to have as much money as possible. And there's no subjectivity or there's no subjective opinion on this. Some people, that is the main driver, and that's okay. But one should accept that and recognize the trade-offs that come along with that. If it's power, similarly, someone can have a lot of power in a job. Tenured academics have a lot of power and status, yet they may not make huge sums of money. That is another trade-off, that if somebody really wants power, that it's good to recognize that. Pleasure, somebody that, I know there's a couple friends of mine, I live in Seattle, and they work at REI, and they work very tight 9 to 5 hours because they want to get outside as quick as possible every day. They want to maximize that pleasure. And they also don't have the most power, don't make the most money, but they love what they do. And then fame would be that last piece, which is this overall, is it that really in some ways, if I look at these four, fame is what drives me, is this opportunity to share original thought and be known for that original thought. That would be where I see I want to maximize my individual choices for. So start with that. Ask yourself, which of those four really are driving you? Once you've determined that, the huge set of options that exist in the world actually begin to dwindle down pretty significantly. If it's money, I'm going to say you probably want to make that North Star in tech, finance, real estate, one of these jobs where just look at who the billionaires are in the world and start to think to yourself, how could you replicate a similar career to them? If it's fame, again, what type of fame? Well, that is now your North Star, whatever that type of fame is and how you can go and achieve that. So I would start with those four idols or a similar framework that really asks you what drives you, what is why you want to wake up in the morning. And then from there, think about what within your own individual skill set are you able to do that will help maximize your life toward whatever that one of those four idols are. And those two frameworks, first choosing that main driver and second asking what's realistic given your individual skill set, will actually dwindle things down to a pretty manageable set of options. And then you just choose what's best. You experiment, you get on that path. And the reality is if you find yourself not liking the path, well, then you can pivot to another new North Star.
That is, I think, probably the best piece of advice I've ever heard for helping somebody find a North Star. At some point, we may have to set up a second round of this just to drill in to that a little bit more. So really, really good stuff there. Moving on, what are some of the bigger challenges you faced in your career, and how did you overcome those challenges?
There was a couple. I want to start with one, and it's funny. I really like this podcast. I remember when you were first sharing the idea of this, and what really was the first main setback that I had, and I just was recently reflecting on it, and it did really set up my career to tell me, like, when a setback happens, it is actually could be a huge opportunity. In my undergrad, I was my uncle was one of the founding members of the fraternity that I ultimately joined in my undergrad. And so because of that, I was automatically given a bid and was allowed to have the opportunity to join the fraternity. And everybody knew me as the guy that was the son, or was the cousin, nephew, there we go, nephew of one of the original founders of the house. And so I became our pledge class president. I was just a natural leader in that group. And so when it came time, after I had become a member and everything, when it came time for the next president of the actual chapter to be chosen, it had looked like for the whole duration of my time that I was the one ordained to take that role. But meanwhile, there was another guy, Joe, who I still am close with, and he also is a natural leader and was growing into that more and more. And he decided he was going to run against me. And it became extraordinarily contentious. There was a lot of debates. It was a group of about 100 guys. So there was a lot of different factions within it. And ultimately he won by I don't even think that it was a very close margin. He won, and he rightfully won. There's a variety of reasons, but when he won, I will never forget them calling out the name of who won the vote and feeling this level of crush. Like, I had thought that it was mine. It felt like it was mine for the entire year before it, but it wasn't. And it wasn't because I didn't have my whole heart in it, for a variety of reasons. One of which, I knew I wanted to do more than just be in the fraternity. I wanted to do some work all across the entire school. But it still really hurt. And I took a day, I was sad, I grieved a little bit, and then I moved on. And because I didn't take that role, I had the opportunity to continue to explore other areas, one of which was the general student government. And that led me to an amazing career where I was student body president and ultimately sat on the board of trustees for my university. And had I not had that initial setback of had I become the fraternity president, that was a very demanding job, and I probably would not have had the space to go and explore more and invest in all of these other areas. And I'm so grateful that I had that setback, because it really did work out in my favor. And that taught me that even when things are very hard and I do face certain setbacks, that I can use them as either pivot points, or I can use them to find new space that I can go and explore. And to jump ahead, where really after that setback, I had micro setbacks, I had hard days, I had hard weeks, but in all honesty, I had a very lucky career in the sense that from that point forward, it was just green light after green light. Until I left Microsoft and I joined a startup where I joined with the intention of starting a team, thinking it was a company that was growing. And very quickly I realized that just was not the case. It was a company that had risen with the startup bubble and had popped pretty significantly. And it was evident very quickly when I was in it. But I chose not to think about that reality, and instead tell myself, I left Microsoft for a reason. It's all going to work out. Similar to a degree to what had happened with the student body president, I didn't have my whole heart in it, and I knew there was a lot of red flags, but I continue to just pour myself into it without really planning for contingencies. And when I was laid off, it was a huge setback. In many ways, it was an identity crisis that I faced because I had ridden and built so much of my identity on the success that I had all of those preceding years. And I got laid off 2 more times in the following year, a year and a half, I guess, of startup after startup, where I was there for 6, 7 months and I was laid off. And each time it was hard, but it got easier. And it got easier because every time I looked at it as this is a new opportunity for me to pivot, a new opportunity for me to hold space in a new area. And that is what I continue to do. In one of them, I decided to write a manuscript, and then I got a book deal. And that's the book that we just talked about. In another one, I launched a consulting firm. And I started to use that consulting firm as a way to build case studies that I can reference throughout the book and refine these processes. Another one, I started to write a lot more. And that is what helped me with the book deal. It also helped me with now my blossoming speaking career. So each of these layoffs I used to learn new skills, to grow in new areas, and it yielded this amazing role where I'm back at Microsoft now, and I'm on a co-pilot team where I'm on a horizontal team working with a whole bunch of products within generative AI. It's a skill set that I didn't have when I left Microsoft 3 years ago, but I was able to create not only through those, I was able to build those skills, not only through the jobs that I had done, but because of how I devoted myself and the time in between those jobs when I had the space to explore and try new things and grow. So, two main setbacks is just kind of reviewing from that. Very early on, a setback showed me that every setback, every challenge is a growth opportunity. And then this tumultuous period in my career when there were multiple layoffs, did I always show up 100%? And was I always happy? No, there were some really dark days throughout that period. But I did also make sure that I kept my head up at the highest level, or at the aggregate level, we'll say, and think about how can I turn this space that I now have being laid off into an area to grow for this next step. And each of them turned into next steps until now I'm really happily back at a much more stable role, as much as a stable role can be in tech these days.
I love the positivity behind everything you just said. And if there was a way to sum up what a growth mindset is, I think you just captured that. I'm going to move on here to some skill and insight related questions. What specific skills or mindsets have been crucial in navigating your career twists and turns? I know you just touched on some of that.
The growth mindset is, again, it's huge. I've had the pleasure of meeting Carol Dweck, and again, I just am a huge fan of it. I recently had a TEDx talk, and I used her growth mindset work applied to AI to talk about how thinking about AI in a growth mindset will help people avoid becoming automated ultimately. But inherent in the growth mindset is this mindset of experimentation. And it's really a skill set and a mindset focused on testing to see what works, what feels right, and how there are these micro opportunities to grow from every experiment. I do this in my personal life I'm continuously trying to try new habits or new routines, or bring in new things or remove other things to just see how it changes. How it changes my overall productivity, my demeanor, how present I am throughout the day, which is a big quality of life score for me, we'll say. But specifically in my career, I'm constantly experimenting with what is a new type of content I can create? What is a new platform that I can share that on? What is specifically within my job? It's how can I tweak this presentation? How can I rewrite this in a different way? What is a new type of study that I can run, or a new audience I can share it with, or a new vendor that I can utilize? Like, I'm always trying to think of how can I rebuild the processes or the frameworks that I use in my life to make them more effective at whatever I'm trying to accomplish. And I think that skill is so important for both being able to find what works for each of us. And we are unique people in the sense that we can find great patterns, and there's a framework for everything. There's a process for everything, but each of us will ultimately want to adapt those to a degree to make them work best for us. And that requires experimentation. So I think that again is a skill set of both finding ways to experiment. It is a mindset, though, in the sense that it is also scary to experiment, because sometimes with experimentation you fail, and you have to be able to look at those failures as growth opportunities. Sometimes when you experiment, you learn you need to make changes that may not feel comfortable, and that also sucks. It does, but that's also just a part of being a human. And I think overall the mindset requires staying present and staying in life, which can be its own level of challenging, especially when one is starting. But if you do it enough, you begin to craft enough of your world that it feels easy to stay present, because you're going to be engaged and you're going to be feeling like you are both doing good work in the now, and then it's leading up to something bigger in the future.
Looking back, what would you do differently in your career?
There's a lot of lessons I wish I would have learned earlier. I am really of the mindset that if I'm happy today, I don't want to change that much of my path, because, for those that have seen the Butterfly Effect movie, and if those are familiar with the Butterfly Effect overall, a butterfly flaps its wings in one area of life, or one area of the world, and it creates a tropical storm in another. It's kind of chaos theory is another way to think of it. I can't say that I really would want to have really changed a significant thing, because I am very content where I'm at right now. I'm at peace with I think I've really built a good career. But that being said, there are lessons that you look back and you think, wouldn't it have been nicer? One of which is that I definitely left my master's thinking I really understood the world. I understood how to build product. I felt like I was a master of every domain except for engineering. And the reality was I was just a researcher. And I burned a lot of bridges very quickly when I joined Microsoft. And it was probably one of my biggest mistakes. And it ultimately, in some ways, led me to wanting to leave, because I had burned so many bridges that when it came time for me to pivot, it seemed easier to pivot outside of the company than it did internally, because a lot of the people who had also transitioned to other teams, I had just early in my career set off on the wrong foot with them, because I came in thinking that I knew better than them, which the reality was I didn't. And so it's stay humble would be the through line there. And I continue to try to do that. Even in areas that I do now believe I have a subject matter expertise, I can always learn more. And I continue to live that. The thing I'm currently working on today that, again, I wish I would have started working on 5 years ago, so I wasn't working on it now, or wasn't working on it, just beginning to work on it now, I should say, is patience. I believe one of my superpowers is I'm a driver. I am the type of person that when I see a problem, I am working on that problem. And it has gotten me this career. It has gotten me a lot of the successes that I've had throughout my career has been because I am a driver. It is only recently I realized that every superpower has its weakness that comes along with it. And my weakness is that I will start driving when I don't have enough context, or even worse, when there doesn't need to be a driver. And it's actually through my personal relationships that I've learned that sometimes people just want you to hold space. Sometimes people just need to have a friend. And in that case, the worst thing to do is to start to drive to solve their problem. They just need to be heard. Most of the times, they know what they need to do. They know they can do it. They just need a friend. And the more that I've begun to do that as a friend and as in my personal life, the more that I realized that work's actually very similar. That most of the time, people don't need somebody to come in and just take over and start driving. They just need to be heard. They just need a partner to reflect on, and then they can start to go and drive themselves. And so patience is really big through line for me in all aspects of my life right now. Of just taking a deep breath before I start moving to ask myself, is this the time to drive? Or do I need to slow my pace a little bit to see what all the context is, what all is going on? Then I can drive if I still think that that's the right call.
So having several of these conversations over the past almost 2 months now, happiness has come up as a theme, and the idea that happiness is really on us. Being humble is another key piece of advice that I have heard a lot. I love the superpower thing. You're the first to mention the superpower so far, but it's something I've done some reading on over the past year or two, and I think it's just incredibly interesting. And even the idea, and I think it was maybe through IDEO, had something where they talked about you need to find your superpowers and how to identify superpowers. But with each superpower, there's a shadow side or a piece of kryptonite. And that was just always really interesting to me in terms of thinking about, I think it's easy to think, okay, this is what I'm really good at, or maybe this is what my superpower is. But I think it becomes really powerful when you're able to think of that in terms of, if that is my superpower, what is the shadow side, or what is the kryptonite that comes with that? And I think it really just helps focus on things that you need to work on. So moving forward here, I'm going to ask you about user research. What do you think the future of user research looks like?
Before I answer that question, I was taking a note there, and I want to just respond. I like the kryptonite piece, and then I'll just jump right into the question or answer the question. But it's funny because I think that there is something about it that is hard into the happiness piece. Like, I am happiest when I'm driving. So you almost have to use delayed gratification. And that's how you overcome that kryptonite piece. Because it is like, you have to train yourself to be like, don't lean into what you know you do best. And that's such a skill in its own right. So I just wanted to comment on that because I like that. And there's an interesting piece there. So I'm going to answer your question now. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I am going to answer it first by saying the three camps that I see that are emerging, because I commonly ask other user researchers which camp they most align with. And then I'll tell you my thought on it. So user research has been dramatically impacted by the layoffs in tech. I'm not going to say that it was disproportionately impacted, because I've seen reports that say it has been. I've seen reports that say it hasn't been. So I'm not sure exactly, but as a person who has been a researcher and laid off 3 times, it feels like it's disproportionately impacting. What I will say is in the 3 camps that are forming around this is, there's one that says it's all the company's fault. It's that these companies are being too short term. It's the end of the zero interest rate phenomena era. And so all these companies need to just better understand that research helps with long-term vision, and that's how you win markets over time. Then there's another camp, the reckoning camp, that's like, it's been user research's problem. It's been too academic. It hasn't found the right business cases. It is, it's time for us to change as a field, become more agile, become more built into the product teams, et cetera. And then there's this third team that's like, well, this is why, as design in some ways started as a consulting group, and research has continued consulting practices, that is, and research has continued to have a strong consulting practice, that really researchers are best brought in a consulting fashion. Strictly defined project, deliverable, move on to the next one. And so we need to be more like consultants, would be the third group. I find myself appreciating all of those camps, and in some ways am beginning to believe that there's a fourth camp that I don't hear as many people talk about, which is that AI is going to change a lot. And so these camps don't matter as much, because these are all thinking about the past and the future. We don't fully understand what it's going to look like. If we really do move into an agent-focused future in, we'll say, 3 to 5 years, like a lot of AI experts are saying, then research is going to look a lot different. Research could be being done on synthetic users, which is a scary thought for some people, but it might be possible. There are companies that are out there and research is being done on synthetic users. We might be running projects and having agents run projects with real people, and we are the managers of those projects. That, again, very realistic. There are companies out there that are already enabling this type of work. So we don't know what the future of research will bring. What we do know is that the through line of what research is supposed to do, which is help make better product decisions, will continue to be relevant. And so for me, that is what the camp that I kind of rest in is how, as if anything, it leans most to not that it was all our fault, but that it is up to research to determine how to continue creating insights that are helpful to the product team. And so that is the camp that I ultimately fall most in, whether that is that camp that I previously referenced or kind of creating my own. But it is the fact that I think that good researchers now need to be thinking about how to 10x research, which again sounds very foreign, especially as somebody who is more academically trained. But that is the future that we could be looking at, where that is the expectation that is on us because everybody else's work will be being 10x. Engineers are already beginning to see multipliers in their output, marketers the same. So at some point, it's going to have to come to research too. And so that's at least where my head is overall and how I'm trying to approach this transition.
So what advice would you give to someone earlier in their career who is still trying to figure things out?
This is an unprecedented time in many ways in how much knowledge work has the potential to change over the next 5 years. So I would think less in terms of specific roles that you want to take. I would think less in the specific tasks you want to complete. And I would think more about what type of work, what type of unique skills do you want to bring to whatever you are working on. And those skills will be an important lens that you can grow regardless of the type of tasks you're doing, the type of role that you're in. If you want to be the person who really thinks about that end customer and gets into their minds, that could be a researcher. It could be a market analyst. It could be a role that we have yet to figure out. If yours is architecture, you really want to think about how to solve a problem in a structured way. That could be an engineer today. It could be an ML architect or prompt engineer, which is a brand new role that has been created. So I would think more in the lens of skills and then determine how you can continue to build those skills. The other piece is, unless we have some significant advance in robotics, I doubt that we are going to have humanoid robots in the next 5 to 10 years. Again, I'm just throwing out speculation, but I think that the human touch is going to have a very specific value in the economy for the foreseeable future. So I tell everybody now, just in case there is runaway AI, try to think about what is your unique human touch aspect and what types of jobs could still exist in that type of market if there were a lot of change that happened to the actual like knowledge work that's being currently done. Like for me as a researcher, it would be pivoting to a counselor, a social worker, a therapist. That would be a way that I could still transition my skills to something that I find exciting.
Cool. And for some closing questions here, what is your favorite quote?
I love the Einstein quote. If it is truly Einstein, the definition of insanity is trying the same thing, expecting a different output. It's such a common quote, though. I feel like it's almost trite. This is a quote I commonly reference, and it's funny because I will always have to look up the person who actually shared it because I haven't read his material, but I've heard others say it, and I think it hits so well. It's the real problem of humanity is the following. We have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. I think that sums up humanity so well. We are still very basic when it comes to our emotional and primordial driven actions. We are operating under institutions that have existed for a fraction of the existence of humanity. And really, modern democracy is only about 300 years old. And yet now, truly, we have godlike technology. And those three combined, well, it begins to explain a lot of what we see in our environment.
Okay. And there is a lot of really good content out there. Is there anything you're looking at or anything that you would recommend people to check out?
I think Hard Fork, it's a podcast by the New York Times, daily or weekly listen. Every Friday, I'm excited for it to come out. I think it's a very, it's a great podcast of just keeping up with the times in tech. There's a couple other great podcasts that come out daily that I use to stay up on AI news. The AI Breakdown is a really good one for that. I'm a big fan of Brene Brown when it comes to self-improvement and just thinking about connecting with emotions. So on that side of the house, and I guess I threw that one in there, but then I'll switch back to AI also. The Information, I think, is one of my favorite publications when it comes to anything AI and tech related right now. I feel like they've just been doing a great job with a lot of great scoops and thought pieces.
And Connor, where can people find you?
Biggest source is on LinkedIn, at Connect Connor. Connor Joyce, again, is my name. You can see my book, Bridging Intention to Impact, on the Peach Pit website, on Amazon, O'Reilly. I write for Medium, also UX Collective, and Mind the Product. And hopefully at a local product conference. I'm going to be at Pandemonium in October. And we'll be at the ML Ops, or the Generative AI World Summit, in Austin in November, and many more to come.
Good stuff. Thank you so much for being on today. Ton of great insight here, and really excited to get this episode out there.
Thank you, Ryan. It was great being here. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed our content today, please like, subscribe, and comment below. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time.